welcome to 360-degree Lens View, sponsored by American Caribbean Chamber of Commerce. We are so delighted to be here tonight to have another yet special guest in our interview tonight that will be focused on for Colombia. We have with us the Honorable Morales here with us to tell us what is the current situation and how are we going to work together as one to shift the economy in light of this COVID-19. Again, welcome again to the show, Honorable Morales. Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to move right along with the questioning.
Dr. Baptiste, thank you so much for having me tonight. And well, a big warm to all your audience and your people, as these days are very difficult for everyone, and I hope everyone is taking care of themselves from home. I'm Camilo Morales. I've been working in the energy industry for the last 10 years, and I had the chance to work with the Colombian government as the representative of the National Hydrocarbons Agency, which is the authority responsible to develop the oil and gas industry in Colombia. Also, I've been working since 2017 with the city of Barranquilla. The city of Barranquilla is a lovely city located in the Colombian Caribbean that groups together around 2 million people. It's the largest city in the Caribbean, and it is also the Colombian capital of energy, an industry that has suffered because of the COVID-19. And it is my aim to share with you tonight a message and spread a message of hope so we can be united and we can help each other uh, to fight against this enemy.
Yes, indeed, we have to fight and we have to be together on this. And I am so glad that you give a very well introduction about who you are and what you do in with the government and also in Colombia for the citizens of Colombia. Now, with all that has been going on with COVID-19, what are the precautionary measures as the representative of the government and working with the government to protect the citizen of the spreading of this disease?
Thank you for your question, Dr. Baptiste. Well, let me start by telling you that we have been in a national lockdown since March 21st. So it is going to be almost 2 months that we haven't had the chance to go out. The number of cases are increasing, not as rapid as some other countries around the globe, but uh, until today, we account around 10,000 cases and an average of 5% of deaths. Uh, and the government has taken a couple of measures to reduce the spread of the virus. One of the most important is the mandatory use of mask whenever you are. And there is another important measure that I haven't heard in other countries, and is that according to the last number of your ID, you can get out of your house for buying basic uh, the basic things. You know, if let me give you an example. If your ID number ends on number 1, you can go out on Mondays, but if it ends on number 9, you can go out on Fridays. So this will allow people to be at home, and also the supermarkets and drugstores, etc., uh, to be empty as people remains home. Another important thing uh, is that we had increased the number of beds in hospitals. Countries like Colombia are suffering because we have an average of 1.5 beds for every 10,000 inhabitants. So it is a real small number, and the government is making a big effort to increase that. Also, the lack of ventilators is it's this dramatic because as you know and as you are aware in the news, if patients with COVID-19 entered into a crisis, they might need to get access to ventilators. And if countries don't have it, then the number of people dead will increase. So the government just purchased around 10,000 ventilators. And obviously, pedagogic, the pedagogy on the use of soap and antibacterial gel in houses and offices is very important. So it's how to teach people and citizens in Colombia how the new process of taking care is in place, and this is something that has been in place since March 21st.
My God, that's amazing. It seemed like everybody's doing the same thing. But what really struck me in all that you said is that there is the use of the numbers from your ID or your social number. We don't utilize that. We have pretty much in the States, they've been using a minimum of 10 or 25 people in a vicinity instead of using that number. That's really strategic because it helps to slow down the the number of people that's out and about on the street. That's a very good strategy. And I do understand that there is a great need for the ventilator, not just, in the state, but also in the other part of the world. And I can imagine that for Colombia, it's even, more serious because getting the resources that needed, with the lack of infrastructure structures that going to make it even a little bit harder to get that, especially with the not a lot of import and export being going on lately since this is happening. But that brought me to a very good point. You said in the past 2 months you all have been in confinement. Tell me, what was the strategy used to help with children in regard to education? What happened with children going to school and learning? How the government deal with that aspect?
That's a really good question, Dr. Baptiste. I mean, education and the children at schools are a serious problem when it when we are talking about the virus, because they can spread easily between them. And what I have read about the cases in children is that they have no symptoms, and that is even worse because they don't get all the symptoms of the virus and they can just spread at home. So since March 21st in Colombia, children are studying from home. We have a problem is that around 20% of our children are in rural areas, and due to that, access to internet and academic material is so difficult. So the government is using a strategy that haven't been used in the past, and is that they are using the national broadcast uh,
Mm-hmm.
radio station to teach children at rural areas in the mornings. So that is very clever
Mm-hmm.
because they might not have internet at their houses, but they have a radio. And
Correct.
through that little artifact is how they're learning. And of course, those that have the chance to be in their houses and got access to internet are studying from home and developing their activities. And finally, one of the things is that the government is trying to stop the return of children to schools until the end of the summer, when hopefully we have a better idea on a possible uh, cure for the virus.
Wow, that is amazing of what you just said right now, because that's really a tool for us to work collectively together, because I don't think that every countries are doing what you just said right now, because a lot of them are using, I know for the state, they are using the internet has online learning. And I know the other part of the world probably, either taking the risk, or either they are not um, having any school at all. But the fact that they're using the platform of the radio station to, teach the students, the children to continue educated, that is really good. And that's something that other country can use, because we are in this together, because there's something that in your country and that the other country doesn't know. But when we hear from one another, and we hear the need, and we see the strategies, we can apply certain strategies and modify to make things better for different nations. And that's a very great point, and that was really, really, really clever and very strategic. I might say, really good. I'm really liking what your government is doing right now. But I also noticed in in my research, there is 7 city that has the greatest number of the spread of the virus. And I also noticed that the city that's really 2 million, you mentioned Borikita, 2 million citizen. And also I believe, Bogota is one of the cities, that those 2 cities is like the top of the 7 cities that has the greatest number of the spread of the virus. Can you enlighten what caused that? Is it through traffic, or is it through tourists coming in and out? Why is that particular city, 2 cities, or more in the high peak number than the other fives?
Well, there are a few things here. One of the good things is that Colombia has around 1,200 municipalities, including obviously big cities, and we only have, as you said, 7 cities that are pretty much in crisis. So we can say that around 98% of our country is still with an insignificant or a small amount of cases of COVID-19. The problem
Correct.
with these big cities is that in the case of Bogota, which is the capital of Colombia, the airport was closed the first week of April. And that was a disaster because some of the people that need to travel humanitarian flights to their countries, and some Colombians that were in Europe, in the US, or even China, returned back to Colombia those days. And the virus spread dramatically in this city. One of the other factors is ground public transportation. And this is a cultural fact, In the US, due to the huge infrastructure, you're used to have your own cars and drive from your
Correct.
houses to their offices. But
Hmm.
here in Colombia, public transportation is probably the only way that some people have to travel from their houses to office. And if you are in a bus with 50 people, very compressed, obviously someone with COVID-19 will easily contaminate the other people in the bus or in the metro or in taxis. So public transportation, I think, is probably the reason of the spread of the virus in big cities.
I see. I agree, because that's true. In the states and other, well-developed countries that have the great infrastructures, pretty much everybody has their own vehicle. And if you don't, that's a selective choice if you don't have your own individual transportation. But as opposed to other part of the world where it doesn't have the best infrastructure, has, the United States and some in Europe and so forth, that, is another way of spreading this even greater. Thank you for the elaboration on that, because I was like, the numbers, Colombia has this 10,000, some in some change, of cases. So it means that the precaution that you guys are, you know, implementing is actually working, but it's there was a big spread into those two cities, and I just wanted to know, and also want the audience to have the enlightenment why, you know, that was happening and what could cause the peak of that situation in those particular city. Well responded. Thank you so much.
No,
Now,
thank you. And if you allow me just to add a little comment,
yes.
one of the things that we have experimented as well is the number of tests that we have available
Mm-hmm,
in Colombia.
mm-hmm,
And I think that is probably one of the most important things that we can do to fight this enemy is to test as
mm-hmm,
many people as we can.
mm-hmm,
Because if we don't test people, you can be a known symptom COVID-19 patient and spread the virus all over your family and
mm-hmm,
your friends. So testing is very important, and we have increased the number of tests since March 21st. So
mm-hmm.
we have a now more capability for testing people.
Awesome. That is great. That is great, because testing is really important, because you need to know exactly how to fight with this, you know, deadly virus, you know, which we call it the silent enemy, that we do not know exactly, you know, how it's, you know, how it's being formed and how it's going to be destroyed. But we know that we have to take precautionary measure, and one of that is to make sure that every citizen do have the opportunity to be tested, so we can know exactly what we need to do to stop the spreading of that silent, you know, killer. Now, moving forward, I know that, you know, the projection for 2019 GDP was 321 billion dollars. You know, I'm asking you a question in that aspect. With this happening right now in 2020, and it's taking longer than we all expected, do you foresee the GDP of Colombia to shift downward, or do you see it staying steady, or do you see there is a way that Colombia can pivot, you know, towards the midst of all this adversity, and keep that GDP or increase it?
Well, I truly believe that the world will be contracted in terms of economy. Last year, Colombia, in the last 5 years, Colombia grew on a rate of 4% annually, which is a pretty good number if you compare with some other parts of the world. Uh,
Correct.
and we've been very conservative in our fiscal decisions in country, uh, and that is allowing us to avoid suffering as some other countries are going to suffer in Latin America. Colombia is one of the countries in Latin America that is going to be less affected by the COVID-19 in terms of its economy. We were expecting a growth of 5% before the COVID-19 appears, and now we have an estimated rate of 1 or 2%. So we are not in negative numbers. Obviously, we are not as positive as probably we wanted to be, but we're still growing, which is the significant
Mm-hmm.
message here.
Yes.
Uh, so I'm really glad to say that to your audience, that despite the fact that this enemy is devastating the world's economy, we are taking good measures in terms of our fiscal debt and our taxation system here in Colombia to avoid that contraction.
Amazing, amazing. I'm really glad that, you know, in light of all of this, that, you know, Colombia will be, you know, steady and still have the growth that it desire, you know. And so one of the things that, you know, that caught my attention while you were speaking is, I know that gas and oil, and also the United States is one of the major partner for, coal, nickel, gold, and coffee, and etc. with Colombia. How is that going to impact it, with COVID-19?
Well, Colombia is not an oil producer. I mean, it's not an OPEC country. However, our main export is oil, and pretty much our economy depends on oil. And with the drop in the oil prices due to COVID-19, we had to cut around 25% on our production due to the lifting cost. Colombia is a beautiful country surrounded by mountains and a very difficult infrastructure due
Mm-hmm.
to that landscape, and obviously that increases the price of moving oil from the field to the coast or to the ports, and some of those areas are going to be affected with significant reductions in production. Adding to that, Colombia, it's been reducing its oil reserves in the last 3 4 years, and moving for moving from 12 years gas reserves to 6 years of gas reserves. So it means that the demand of gas is increasing because of industrial purposes, because of development of the country, because of domestic purposes as well. But we haven't done any major discovery. So we need to improve our economy and try to keep working together with the US to bring investors on gas and obviously oil. Uh, Another important thing is that worldwide, around 50% of the capex in oil projects will be reduced. In Colombia, the capex that we were estimating was going to be invested in these projects is going to be reduced by 60%. It means that operators were planning to invest around 1.2 billion US dollars in exploration and production this year in Colombia. That number is going to decrease by 400 million, which is still investment, but not as we were expecting. However, if we move into the gold, coal, nickel, I truly believe that the mining sector will be crucial when returning to the normal life, because when this crisis happened worldwide, people start consuming more minerals in different ways. Just to save money, people buy gold, and when the economy recovers, people will start consuming more energy. It means coal will keep working as normally as it used to be, probably more than the climate change experts were expecting. But minerals are gonna be a significant part of the Colombian economy when the recovery comes.
Wow, that's some positive insights. So all the individual that's interested in investing, this is like really a great opportunity for them to begin to put their research together and get their partners together, because knowing that when we come to the recovery, because this too shall pass. Yes, we are going to a very challenging and unforeseen time, but we know this too shall pass, and we will be at the phase where we going to pivot the economy, and those that is into business and that are investors, it's a great time for them to begin to, research and getting all their counterparts together for moving forward, because that's really insight nuggets that you just give the audience of what they need to look forward for with their partners, or if they are themselves investors. Great, great, great insight. Thank you for that. Totally appreciate that. Now, you know, in all that you were saying, it also bring me to this. I know that Colombia is also good for commerce locally and also manufacturing locally in Colombia. How is that being impacted, with this COVID-19?
Well, extremely affected as manufacture everywhere in the world. They have cut jobs and they have reduced their budgets for this year. Some of the big manufacturing companies have decided to send to holidays their employees and wait to see if their economy returns as soon as possible. But what we have seen in the last few days is that the government is making some flexibility in the law for the manufacturer sector to return to the normality. So last week, I mean, last Monday, uh, the big industrial manufacturers just started to work again, and by making that announcement, we basically save around 3 million jobs that probably if we didn't make that decision, uh, that people won't have anything to eat at their houses today. So it was a great decision done by the government. I totally support it because there must be a balance between health and the economy, especially in countries in Latin America or on countries like Colombia, where 70% of our employees are under informality. So it's people that goes every day to the streets to get some money to take back to their houses. They don't have a pretty stable amount of money coming to their pockets on a monthly basis. So if if they don't go out and find the money to bring back to their houses, they won't have anything to eat that night. So I'm really glad to hear that the government is making a big effort in terms of biosecurity, in terms of health protocols, in terms of public transportation to let these people out and work.
That is amazing. That is amazing. You have brought me to a great point because a lot of the third world countries and the less developed with the less infrastructures, yes, there is a lot of the national citizen from all across the global diaspora that looks every day for, their meal, their ticket meal, or the meal just for themselves and their family. And then being under, confinement because of COVID-19, it puts the government into an obligation or responsibility to make an end way for these individuals across the board, not just in Colombia, but also in other less developed and less infrastructures country across the global diaspora, because those individuals, if they don't go out, if they don't work, if they don't find something, they will go without eating. They will go without, even having water to drink, and so I'm very um excited to hear that the government of Colombia is making provisions and making a strategic pathway to allow individuals that don't have to be in a position that they can still bring meals not only for themselves but to their family on a daily basis. That is a great thing. And in saying this, I also want to bring this to you also, is that I know right now, what can the global diaspora do together before we get to the greatest power, which we know, United States, German and China and Japan and all of these different major powers, the five big powers, or in conversation together. What can the rest of the global diaspora that don't have all the numbers and all the infrastructures can do together in light, of this pandemic to help one another? For example, how can Colombia partner or work with Haiti or work with Jamaica or work with, Ghana, in this, so we can be a commodity for one another? Do you foresee that happen, or is there any initiative for that to happen?
You touch such a really important point, Dr. Baptiste. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this is an enemy that is not attacking the US, is not attacking China, is
Mm-hmm.
attacking everywhere in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yourself, myself,
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. And what we should do is share best experiences and understand how every country's behavior can drive that examples. Let me give you the case of Sweden. As you may know, Sweden decided to keep normal life, and people can still in the streets with no problem, can go to work.
Mm-hmm.
They can
Mm-hmm.
even fly between one city to another city. Uh, but we cannot compare Sweden with islands of the Caribbean, of Colombia or Colombia, because we don't have the same infrastructure, as you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, we don't have the same amount of people, despite the fact that there are small islands in the Caribbean in terms of population, still a significant number of people living in these islands. And for a country like Sweden with a small amount of people, it is easy to control the virus just by having a 5-star public healthcare system, etc., etc. So we need to learn from countries similar to ours. So let's say Colombia can be a really good example for countries in the Caribbean in terms of how to deliver aids to people, how to take measures to avoid going to the streets, how to boost global support, because Colombia have been pushing the European Union, the US, the Chinese government to help with this enemy. And I think this is not a fight that we must, this is not a fight that every country should fight itself. This is a fight that we need
Mm-hmm.
to do together
Correct.
as human beings, because the only way we can destroy the enemy is by sharing best practices. And this is a call that I do to everyone that hears this podcast and can do the difference by telling the histories of success of a country to their people. This will make difference.
That's powerful. Thank you so much. So well said. So well said. Because really, at this point, it cannot be a fight of one nation by itself. It has to be all nations that have similar infrastructure to look at what works, what doesn't work, and what resources that we can put together for us to be able to fight this. It should be where, Jamaica, Haiti, or DR can call, Colombia, what are you doing to help you with this spreading? Or what resource that you have that we can, use, so we can help in our lack of resources that we don't have, or lack of hand sanitizer, or lack of our masses. Because I truly believe, in order for us to have less casualty in this battle, we must come together as one, of the similar patterns, because you cannot compare the US with Colombia, and you cannot compare, Jamaica to Europe, because that's like comparing apple and orange, which is not going to be matched, because there is not a familiarity to the infrastructure. So it's going to take countries, nations that has the similar infrastructure to have those positive, answers, and those positive best practice that's working, and those resources that one may be lacking, and they begin to work and share together to stop the spread of this virus, who is the silent enemy. I truly believe what you said. You have given the audience, and you have given the nation a golden, you know, nuggets on how to fight that, and it's really important that we come together in that notion. In moving forward, I would like to ask you, what is your call to action tonight? What would you want to let the people know, and let your government know, and let the citizen of the global diaspora, because we all are global citizens, to do as a call of action?
Thank you so much for this question, Dr. Baptiste. The first message I would like to share with the audience, with the world, is that we need to be together. That is number one. By being together, I'm not saying that we should go out and shake hands and kiss each other. I'm saying that we need to be conscious that social distancing will be common for at least 1 or 1 year and a half. And that is number one. If we accept that and we change our habits, then we will reduce the number of cases. Number two, of course, we need to open carefully the economy. We cannot be in a lockdown forever, because otherwise the economic consequences will be worse than the Big Depression. You saw it today in the US, the worst rate of unemployment ever.
Yeah.
And we are seeing that all over the world. The other thing is that we need the governments of the world to make a big effort. I always use the economies of Keynes to give an example. When the Second World War ended, all the governments made a big effort in improving their local infrastructure by spending a significant amount of government money, creating thousands of jobs. I need that the world will require that again, the Keynes model in terms of economy. Governments making efforts to keep the local economy up, improving infrastructure, improving roads, transportation, healthcare systems, and creating thousands of jobs. Otherwise, we will be on a global chaos.
I agree. I agree. Because we really have to come together in all the aspect that you actually mentioned tonight. Because the call of action can no longer be about one nation. It needs to be about the global citizen, because we all will be in chaos and we all will be in trouble. And I totally agree with you. My God, this is really, something that nobody see coming for 2020, because everybody had a different plan. Everybody had different projections. It's like everybody projection no longer be individual projection now. It has to be modified and pivot so that it can be a commonality and a, global in the unity, but yet inclusively, collectively work together so that we can actually bring change for every economy, not just one economy.
And
This is
and I would like to add also that we will be more humans.
Mhm.
In the last decades, we dedicate ourselves to a, a system that wanted us to be working 24 hours, 7 days. So we have now time for families, children, even dogs, pets, you know. So this is something that is changing, and is that we are more human beings now again. And I think everyone that is at home having the chance to be with its family is it's considering that as a bless. And that is how the world is going to change, by being together.
I totally agree with you. That's the only way, and everything you said is so on point. It's so needed. And while you were talking, I even see technology. Do you foresee more technological position in the less infrastructure, countries? Do you foresee in this new paradigm shift, that we will have more technology, and the young people will have the chance for them to invest their knowledge to really change the way things will be for the next 20, 30 years.
I totally agree with you. I think this is a call for undevelopment countries to improve its technology, especially connectivity. I mean, this crisis will take us to the next level of democracy, which is the connectivity democracy. It's access to information, to education, to jobs by being connected. And everyone should have access to that in the world. So undeveloped countries should start working on that strategy as soon as possible. Otherwise, they will they will lose their time these days. And every crisis is an opportunity, and I think this is the opportunity to consider a new global educational model, for example, where everyone can access education from their houses.
My God, you're right. I totally agree with you. And it is the right time. It's the time for us to come together and really, positioning ourselves to be in the center of everything, and actually has the right infrastructure once and for all, not be counted out, but to actually be counted in. Because right now, for the past, several decades, we have been fighting to be counted in. Now we are at the changing of a whole new economy where we can be counting in the decision making has other nation that never had the opportunity. Well said. You really, explain it and elaborate on that correctly. And I totally, totally thank you for that. You know, but I have Kirby. She has a question for you. So I'm going to go ahead on and let her speak so she can ask you the question, Honorable Morales.
Hey,
Hi, Kirby.
hey, I do have one question. Now that we're talking about all of this, what do you think is going to be the midst of all of this once this is all done?
Well, that's a really difficult question to answer. I mean, this is the question that
Yeah.
every single leader in the world wish to answer properly. But if you if you ask if you ask me, I think in general in general in a general way there are gonna be three new drivers on human behavior.
Mhm,
Family, now that we are
mhm,
having more time in our houses, family it's having the importance they used to have in the past.
mhm,
Number two, technology. As we were discussing with Dr. Baptiste, I mean, the world will be more connected now than ever, especially those countries that are under development and are suffering because no are in a lockdown with access to nothing. So connect technology will be another key driver. And the last one is gonna be the new way of jobs. So
mhm,
new companies or entrepreneurships that are gonna be uh, starting after the crisis are gonna be new models of companies that allow people to work from their homes, and they're gonna be as a new setup of rules for people to work from their houses. So those are gonna be the key drivers in the new normality, as I call it.
mm. I like that. I like that. And I think it's going to be for the good. For what you're saying, it's going to be for the good.
A lot of opportunity for great innovation and great invention to take place as long we understand the meaning of lockdown is not to lock down and not thinking and processing and positioning ourselves, but is to put the pieces together while we are in lockdown so that when we come out, we can come out better than we were before. Better people, better economy, better world. That's powerful.
That's powerful, and that's such a great conclusion, Dr. Baptiste. I mean, it is our time,
Yes.
and we will be a better world when we return to the new normality.
Indeed, indeed. Wow. Is there any last word that you want to share with the audience, Honorable Morales, before we end this podcast? You have been an amazing guest. You have given us some insights and you have given us some great nuggets that we can really take and we can really share and we really can come together to be a change maker in this world. It's your floor for you to say the last words to the people before I close out.
For sure. First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me today to share with the audience these words of hope. And that is probably my message to everyone that listens to this: hope, resilience, and patience. Because as we remain together fighting this enemy, we will end with a glorious victory. And that will allow us to return back to the new normality with all the enthusiasm that we need to recover our economies and to create a better world for the future generations. That the key message on this situation. How are we going to create a better world for our future generations? And once again, I hope that everyone stayed at home, taking care of themselves, and Colombia, my country, will be very open and friendly for all the Caribbean countries and friends once this happens. And we should be one together developing our countries.
Wow, you hear it first on 360 Degree with Dr. Baptiste. Again, thank you, Honorable Morales. Thank you, Kirby, for asking that questions and being a great partner. And we thank every audience for listening to this podcast tonight. We look forward for you to send us more questions and anything that you need to know about Colombia and about Honorable Morales. We will be more than happy to share information with you. Again, we would like to thank our sponsor, American Caribbean Chamber of Commerce, for partnering with us in moving forward with 360 Degree Lens View. You can follow them. You can get more information about them in their website, which is www.accc.global. Again, have a good night, everyone. And I look forward to see you guys very soon on our next show. Have a great night and thank you, Honorable Morales.